Good day, everyone, and welcome to the Medium's Porch. We are coming to you from multiple locations with our home base in the Lilydale radio show stream. Now, if you haven't had a chance to explore the spirituals hamlet of Western New York, you may do so online by going to lilydaleassembly.org. Now, I have a few questions for our audience as we begin our show today. What is the supernatural nature of men? In what and how does it embody our manifest self? What mechanisms trigger it? And why does it happen to someone at all? What conditions must be met in order to make it explorable and experienceable? If these questions intrigue you, I recommend you stick with us through today's show because these are the questions that drive our guest on his mediumistic journey. I am your host, Kathleen Bolt. I am a Lilydale registered spiritual medium, and my focus at present is on serving as a medium operating with the values and principles of spiritualism, providing individual healing, reassurance, guidance, and support through communicating with discarnate spirit loved ones. Now, why do I tell you all this again today? I share with you this specifically because our guest today is showing us that mediumship is more than just the kind of mediumship that I do, or that a lot of the registered mediums in Lilydale do. Mediumship is a broad scoping genre of abilities for working with spirit. And I want to introduce you with a treat for you today to our medium today. And we are working with Kai Felix Muegge today. Did I say your name right, Kai?
Yes, that
I
sounded
tried to do it with you.
quite original. Thank you very much, dear Kathleen. Thank you very much for having me.
I made an attempt. All right, so let me tell our audience a little bit about you. You are internationally known and recognized as a medium. You live in Germany with your wife Julia, and you both travel the globe doing seances and bringing forth the intelligence and phenomena of spirit. Now, as a child, listeners, Kai has had a variety of inexplicable, seemingly supernatural experiences. And in his teens, he had profound encounters with the spirit world and spirit, and these propelled him to research and explore what would become his life's theme, the dynamics of the supernatural. So I'm sure we're going to be hearing more about that. Kai, with the support of his guides, trained himself in meditation techniques, autosuggestion, hypnosis, remote viewing, instrumental trance communication, shamanistic journeys, practical and hermetic magic. I mean, gosh, Kai, that is quite the realm of curiosity that you've had, and it's all informed the work you do, doesn't it?
Yes, it is. I mean, it is a journey of 40 years
Yeah.
in the meantime. And I mean, 40 years is a long time. That it has to be filled with something. And why ever? It was written in my book of fate that this started to be with me from a very, very early age on. And that was not my plan. I'm coming from a familiar background of my family, which is more or less strictly rational. Rational. My mother was a teacher. My father is a salesman. So the plans for me were actually something different.
Right.
My grandfather was an ophthalmologist. There were yes, there were ideas that maybe I would study medicine, but not so far it was going.
Right. Now, you founded the Felix Circle in 2003. Now, the Felix Circle, that is your middle name. Is that your grandfather's name?
Exactly.
Okay. All right.
Exactly.
He was supposed to come, not supposed to, you invited him, is a better way to say that. You invited him when you had your circle, correct?
Exactly. Actually, it was meant as a healing circle
Mm-hmm.
from the beginning on, and I thought that a grandfather, a physician in the spirit world, an ophthalmologist, would be optimal to start through with a new circle beginning 2003. Yes, but
Totally so, yeah.
totally unawaited. He rejected, I don't know if that's the right word, but I could not fulfill the plan that I had. It took years until he became activated, so to speak, in as a member of the spirit team with which we are working generally, as a member who is specifically actually nowadays responsible for our healing session. So in the meantime, he's with us.
Yes.
But it took years and a Northern American Indian ceremony of 3 days to actually.
Oh, a 3-day ceremony. Wow. Okay. Do you think that was because there was a part of you that needed to get ready for this? Or was it more like he was needing to do some work on the other side? I mean, this is just speculation, unless he's actually told you something about that. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I believe it's a bit from both aspects.
Okay.
He told us, actually, he told us that he was too busy at the time of our request, too busy in playing a part in helping spiritual forces and powers to cure people or to treat people in the third world. Brazil was actually mentioned at that time, and I, of course, had to accept this.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, I believe that was so
Mm-hmm.
because on the other side, my own development, maybe I was a little bit too directly forwarding into this, expecting this so naturally, unquestioned to have him with us. I believe this was a lecture as well, uh, to teach us that the spirit world is not necessarily like an earthly telephone mechanism or something like that, ready to be addressed only to fulfill our dreams in regards to spiritual activity, you know.
And I think a lot of people that engage with us as mediums expect they could just, well, since we can do this, we can just pick it up and call their dad in spirit and say, why aren't you here? I know some people do get upset that they don't just come to our beck and call, but that's part of our spiritual understanding and growth here, right? Knowing
I
that
know, yeah.
there's a greater intelligence out there. So beautiful. Yeah. So you're
Yeah,
working with your
definitely.
grandfather now, and he's doing a lot of healing. Now, you started as a healing circle. You weren't there right away. You're doing more healing now, because I know we had just talked about this before we started speaking, that I had been in one of your seances in the earlier, a decade ago. Not as early as when you started, of course, but in a decade ago. And you said there's been a lot of changes, and you're mentioning the healing. So can you tell us a little more about how the healing process is happening in your seances with the help of your grandfather and anybody else?
Yes. I would love to. Yeah, this is a very varied thing actually, because he is actually working with additional physicians. He is actually supervising the processes and is then sending into the circle work actually his helpers, and these helpers were actually earthly colleagues of him. We could verify this, that these were actual once existing colleagues. And he is actually using truly a very, very varied approach in regards to the fact that he is using every faculty available in this huge spirit team we are actually applying here. So there is, for example, it would be natural if he would refer to extraterrestrial approaches of healing. For example, we are working with extraterrestrial entities who work with subformants. Subformants are uh, unaudible forms of speech. So you hear words in the forefront, so to speak, but there is a layer which is not actually audible for us. And this layer is actually communicating with the most profound and most deeply inside of us. This image of an onion, a very inwards laying layer of intercommunication. So even such very unusual, or if how very much unusual this is, I'm not so sure. I know that extraterrestrial powers are, by the way, in the beginning of the spiritistic or spiritualistic movement, in the first 30 years, that was very, very widely approached. Extraterrestrials, their language, and how they were existing, and there was a huge channeling going on, specifically, yeah, in the States and in Europe as well. Inside of the movement, with the time, this was then not really wanted anymore from a certain point onwards, when mediumship became more or less only appreciated looking for survival proofs and barely not much else. So in so forth, and in regards to that, to use extraterrestrial healing approaches may sound to the one or the other very traditional working medium a little bit unusual, but it has a long tradition inside of the movement. So he uses his colleagues of then, who have maybe a little bit more earthly or more understandable forms of approach to the clients who come to us, and up to these very unusual extraterrestrial forms. So he's very varied, and this is so until today. The forms of treatment are very time consuming. Sometimes I would like to have them a little bit more shorter styled. And why? Because then I could reach more people with
Right.
it. You know, if it takes so long and we have a session with people from a certain moment in time, it's too long for them. They cannot wait anymore. After we had 5 patients or so,
Right.
the 6th is out of energy until he's it's his part then, you know. It's to be in the row, so to speak. So yeah, a very varied approach of my grandfather.
Yeah.
Oh, by the way, excuse me, but this may be important on the more traditional side, and specifically because he was mentioning Brazil himself as a country where specifically German spirit doctors have a long tradition in their presence in spirit teams of Brazilian healing mediums. So this is a very, very known thing in Brazil, to work with German spirit doctors. And one approach of my grandfather when he is working with us is to lead the negative force out of the body via the eyes.
Ah.
That means for the illness, the illness is become dense, compacted, so to speak, inside of the body, and it is led coming out of the eye as a little stinky black gum-like thing, which is starting to bulge from a specific point in time onwards. It is touchable in the eye, and the patient recognizes it. And then we can slowly bring it forward and out of the eye, and it is then burned in the end. And patients claim to come into relief states after a kind of treatment like this. So this is quite unusual. You know, we are working with materializations from the eye, also on a demonstrational side. So here in my work, the spirits like to use this very, very sensitive area around the eyes they use to demonstrate their power over the physical world, and the body is a part of this. So working with the eye and showing that from the eye sockets they are capable to materialize things of all sorts is showing us their control and their power over the body. This is a very specific thing in my mediumship. The eyes to be used as a spiritual proof for the existence of spiritual powers.
And to take it further, I know from reading your materials and looking at the video, there's a video of you bringing an port through as well, where you have the crystals coming through. I remember you saying that when these objects manifest, it doesn't damage the flesh. It doesn't damage the eye, the sensitive tissue of the eye. Your eyes don't go red, your eyes don't water. It just appears and comes through. And so they protect you as a physical energy, right?
Absolutely. This is natural that this is part of the demonstration, actually, to keep the bodily tissue totally untouched. We had even instances when these objects, sometimes the eyes are actually, you just mentioned it, are being used to bring forward presences. Also, by the way, a very, very old tradition inside of spiritualism. The entities bring through beautiful things. This can be sometimes have a monetary value, sometimes it's made of plastic, and every time we are urged to not put spirit presences in any monetary value system. And of course, this is right. So they come in all forms of material through the body. The eyes are only one of the locations where these spirit portals can be building up. Actually, at every part of the body, such a building up of a portal, how they call it, can be happening. And this is due to the maybe most profoundest message, which is coming with physical mediumship from the very first start onwards, because physical mediumship always comes with meaning. Physical mediumship always comes with messages. And one of these, even not needed to be outspoken messages, is the showing that the material world is not as stable as we believe. It is in a fluctuating state. They are leading the material world ad absurdum in front of our eyes and show us that fixation onto the material actually has no meaning at all. And I mean, we know that, even though we are, of course, somehow bound at the same time into the material world. But this is one of these profound messages coming with the whole scenario. And by the way, the reason, therefore, that in this very young spiritual tradition, physical phenomena were so widespread from the beginning on. These physical phenomena have to do with the materiality of how we are leading our lives. And maybe in other societal environments, that was not so urgent as it was and as it is in our society. And that's why physical phenomena always were so strong in the Western Hemisphere effigy, in the Western Hemisphere projection of this ancient tradition of communicating with the supernatural, communicating with the spirits as the messengers of the supernatural.
I think it's hard for people in our living every day that aren't focused the way we are in the spirit world to accept uncertainty at the basic level. So I can see why sometimes physical mediumship can be unnerving, because you're saying the main message is to show that this world is not solid. Right. And then that would,
Yeah.
the instability, you use the word instability. There's that sense that, if it's unstable, gosh, that would unnerve a lot of people. So I can see just on that level. And so just because I brought that up, wanted to ask you how that has affected you over the years, having that knowledge yourself that there's so much more to life and living, and to the dynamics of the phenomena and the spirituality of things and how they interlock. How does that affect you when somebody just can't see that possibility? How have you dealt with that over the years?
Yeah. Yeah. It infected us in so far that we were from the beginning on, uh, or we had to, from the beginning on, we had to open this mediumship to very complex topics and
Mhm.
themes. And the speeches and the insights and the perspectives and the messages which are coming through are partially very complex, and they are dealing with, yeah, complex themes about how reality is built, and uh, uh, what spirituality actually means, what spiritual sovereignty is, and how it might affect, like, the momentary worldly spiritual crisis in which we are
Sure.
sticking, and so forth. And I would like to give you an example, which I many times have given, but it is actually very much fitting in here. Um, the Eva at the Togo. This was a warrior society in Africa. The Eva, Ewer, Eva. The Eva at the Togo. Togo is a river in Africa. They were discovered by missionaries in 1920, and after they were discovered, so to speak, anthropologists and archaeologists, more missionaries, of course, were coming, and they were usually starting to sit down with the elder of these then found tribes to find out what their pantheon is. What is your idea? What is your knowledge about how the world is being built, where you come from, where you go to, and so forth? How are you embedded in your lifestyle, which you are living here? And 1920, the chronists and the anthropologists, they did learn from the Eva that they were actually believing in 11 pre-birth worlds and 11 post-death worlds. So actually they were believing in a 23 leveled dimensional scheme of reality. They claimed that all these 22 parallel layers of reality are all interconnected. What happens there has an effect onto all the 22 other realms. And what happens here on our realm also is affecting these 22 parallel realms. All these realms are inhabited by effigies, projections of the in our reality existing individuals. That means these 20 these altogether 23 realities had a direct, they all were projections of the here and now existence, and the here and now existence at the same time was
So
also
simultaneously,
a
right?
projection, exactly. a projection of the other 22 realms of reality. So, um, not that they were connected, they were actually influencing themselves in an intermutual way, just as you was saying, Kathleen. And, you know, of course, this concept is much more complex and much more longer. Only to give you an idea about what the warrior tribe of the Eva at the Togo, 1923, were facilitating when it was in regards to their pantheon and in their belief systems and so forth. And now let us put this against the scheme we are working here in worldly spirituality with. What is this? What is contained in what is the content of this system here? Actually, an afterlife realm and a here and now, right?
That's how most people think of it, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we we are the alleged the alleged civilization, and we are the civilized part of that world. And how can it be that in this most youngest form of spiritual movement, in which all the knowledges of the world up to this point here and now is actually should have flown into,
Right.
that
So
we
when you're doing your seances and spirits coming in, they could be coming from anyone if we follow that thread of thinking, or belief that
indeed,
from any one of those 21 other layers, right?
indeed. And I mean, this was, of course, we cannot claim that the Eva had in any way or form a complete scheme here.
Sure.
I,
Yeah,
I only wanted to compare it
of course.
with what we are working with. That must not be necessarily false, but it shows a lack of complexity,
Mm.
which I believe is very important to develop spirituality further on and into a future and into a spirituality of the third millennium, let's say.
Mm.
Something is lacking, and maybe complexity could be one of the lacking parts. I mean, why I am supposing that anything is lacking within spirituality, because since, at least in Europe, since the 70s, latestly, inside of the spiritual movement, people were complaining about a declining, obvious decline of quality and of quality coming maybe with complexity naturally. I don't know, but I would like to somehow be a part of impulse, bringing complexity and quality back into the movement. To relive it, maybe that's a better word.
Right, to revive it, to bring it
Yeah,
forward. And I feel like, yes, that our mindset will make a difference on that, right? Our intentions, how we approach things. I would also, from what you're talking about, thinking about my own experience and also thinking about what you've shared, is that we're never going to get bored. I mean, if boredom is a question, right? There's so much to develop into. There's so much more to know. And the other thing,
absolutely.
as you've been talking, I've been thinking about is like even the meditative state, right? The state of awareness. When we first sit down, when we first start developing, we are, beta mind just going nuts there, crazy monkey mind. And then as we develop, we can start to realize there's a watcher watching the watcher watch, right? There are these layers even within our own comprehension and our own consciousness. So if that's possible, why wouldn't it be possible for everything else on the frequency that's coming into us as mediums, whatever our capacity and functionality? why wouldn't we be bringing in other layers and dimensions and perspectives and frequencies? I mean, it makes sense, even at the level of extraterrestrial, right? We have its frequency, its energy, and it's all interconnected.
Absolutely. When imagine that, Kathleen, when we started to become a little bit more internationally, we
Mm.
were encountering a lot of people who first had to swallow when I was talking about spirits not being spirits of the deceased. They had totally lost the idea, or it is a knowledge actually. If we are going like historians into the movement and what the movement was focusing on to, and even more important, where the movement is actually coming from, specifically in the colonial European countries. It is very much attitude to reject, for example, the proven idea that mediumship actually is a modern a projection, let's say, of shamanism and indigenous activities. And not only that, it is from its own headlines the same, bringing the spirit world close to the rest of the people, so to speak, bringing spirituality and the spirit world and the spirits close to the others, close to society. This is what what is the thing the shamans and the medicine men had to do. It was their cultural thing to do it. And, you know, not that we are actually doing the same, because we are doing the same, even if it is, let's say, only the spirits of the deceased. Where are the spirits of the winds, the spirits of the trees, the spirits of planets, the spirits of angelic beings? Everything is existing in the spiritual world. Everything we know and even everything we are not knowing anything about is existing in the spirit world. And as you said, we can actually, through these mind techniques we have developed due to the buffer trance, which we are applying. Indigenous folks not necessarily are applying this buffer that has to do how spirituality is accepted in our society. When I'm sitting in front of my boss at work, it's not necessarily recommendable that your spirits speak through you exactly at that moment. So
Right.
we in
Oh,
the
hang on a
West,
minute. I have something to pull out of my eye.
yeah. So we have invented this form of a buffer, and actually to bring this transpersonal momentum into it, we actually could circumvent and avoid the fact of that in our cognition. Wait, I'm just lacking the term. It's the conditional. Uh,
Like the context they're shaping it
I
into.
no, I'm using it every day, and now I don't find the English word. The cognitive dissonance. You
Ah, there
know,
we go. Yeah.
cognitive dissonance. There it is. So we can avoid it. We can give off responsibility, which is also always for us something we have to come upon it. So not that it is the same regarding what is being done, showing the society that there is a spiritual world existing. No, even historical, there is an unquestionable relationship between the first role models of the movement, of our
Right.
movement, which, by the way, started with physical phenomena.
Yes.
The knocking noises were
Mhm.
unquestionable physical phenomena. The chronics of the American settlers are full with supernatural experiences and supernatural encounters. It's unbelievable. Why necessarily 1848? The knocking events at the
Boxes.
house. Exactly, I don't know. But at that time, unquestionably, the press body inside of the United States was so advanced and developed. Every single, every miniature town had their press releases and so forth. And through the post carriage system, even the farthest farms were interconnected, and the news could come to them because, I mean, that Rochester was so widely recognized was actually through the press, which was at that time already existing. I learned about a number which said that when the three Fox sisters started the movement to share,
Mhm.
and that was distributed through the press, that there are alleged 30,000 protagonists which felt triggered by these news from upper United States, the whole United States.
That's a lot of people back then,
That's
especially.
a lot of
Yeah.
people, but it's okay. It's an estimation, of
Yeah.
course. But if we look at how huge and how large the United States are, and how prominent these ideas were at that time, the American society was hungry. 1850, they had so many material approaches and patents, hundreds daily, helping everybody in household farming and what not. But the people were lacking or feeling the lack of a spiritual need, or what, or how shall we describe? And the forethinkers, the philosophical forethinkers like Swedenborg, a very recognized man at that time, he was already doing uh, trans channelings, and he was already describing an upcoming worldwidely very influential movement which would be coming up and which would describe and show us an existing parallel spirit world. And I believe what Swedenborg could do, many others were in one way or another applying a training as well. And that's how they come up to 30,000 people who claimed, I believe, I also have a contact to this mysterious realm. And in the following, all over the States, these enormously individual approaches of mediumship were starting. That's why in the first 30 years, that was so extremely varied and progressive and strong, because there were no boundaries, there were no technical boundaries, forms of radiation and whatnot, and power fields and whatnot. And spiritually, there were no boundaries. And that's why full materializations and extraterrestrials and languages they were channeling, and the most unbelievable displays in spirit phenomena were happening and going on, and they were so reliable that even inside of the scientific community, it was then clear. So many Nobel Prize winners and very influential scientists, they went into seances and never came back, so to speak.
didn't come back the same, right? Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah, well,
exactly.
even politicians, right? I mean,
Yeah,
back in the time of Lincoln, right? They were, his wife was engaged in home circles, right? And consulting
very much.
mediums, one particular medium.
Exactly,
So
exactly.
yeah. Yeah,
Um,
like everybody had their own version of a circle, and you had the table tipping
yes,
and
and
different
even
sounds and
much more when you look into these first approaches and how, for example, that with the table came up, and
right.
how that with the cabinet came up, uh, out of very pragmatical first approaches and how they looked like. But also, of course, clients who uh, were writing down their witness statements about ongoings of the most unbelievable expression, like Kate Fox with the banker Livermore, for example, only one example with this Kate was the strongest in physical phenomena. That was, by the way, at the beginning not discerned. That came around 1900 up to the First World War, that there was made this discerning of, um, you know, either you had a contact to the spirit world, then this contact could be varied a little bit, visionary, a little bit maybe physical. Um, and this was a manly thing to actually rip it apart. And
Yeah.
yeah, actually, it was the other physical forms of mediumship. There was a movement that was believing that the physical form of mediumship are helping to avoid fast successes in the proof of the survival of, yeah, what is it? Is it the survival of the soul? Also something nobody is discussing about. What are we talking about? Is it the survival of the soul? Is it the survival of consciousness? Is it the survival of personality? So this is not very much often discerned in no discussion, nowhere. And um, yes, and today, as we both know, there is actually, usually it is referred to as survival of personality. That would mean we are exactly the lame same on the other side as we are already here. How boring is that?
Yeah, it's an interesting contrast, because in the principles of spiritualism, let's say, they talk about progression, right? They talk about development and progression, and yet you'll find some spiritualists say that it's the survival of the personality. And I have wrestled with that very thought myself, because I have been able to bring through spirit loved ones to people, and they come through with some adjustment to their personality. They come through as evidence to give to the person so that that person understands it's them, right? So that will be personality, that will be traits and characteristics. But when they start talking and move into the sophistication of the message, I've been noticing that so often they're only bringing what, like, the words that I'm bringing through are the ones that the person across from me understands, but they're still trying to bring them into the sense that they're not entirely the same. They have a broader scope. They're more aware. They're busy over there. They're doing things like you said with your grandfather, right? Your grandfather was busy in another area entirely in terms of our understanding of geography. So I've had that same question about, is it really personality, or are they giving us their personality so we can feel comfortable, safe,
Exactly. This
and
this is
certain?
the yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Also, this is these are the questions we actually have to confront ourselves with.
Yeah.
In physical mediumship, it's exactly the same, because we are sticking in the proof of survival theme as you are, and this has to do very much from the demands of the clients, what they would like to have, what they would like to experience. And it is more or naturally, it is more or less natural that they, uh, when they hear mediumship, it is natural for them to expect a contact with a loved one, maybe not necessarily proof, but a contact with a loved one. And so only that in our case, the message is physical mostly. For example, in our Switzerland sessions we just had, there were alleged family jewelry overgiven to sitters, and they were identifying it, and it could not be delivered at lifetimes. So it was delivered through a spiritual process to the people, and the trance control, the speech control, was elaborating around their family relationships. That was quite a strong issue. And at two sessions in Switzerland, these family pieces of gem, or pieces of heritage, right, were delivered, delayed, but delivered.
Delayed by a century. Yeah.
Yes. But it was an enormous, not only joy, but at the same time relief, because the trance control, as I said, physical mediumship isn't always coming with a message. With the object that were overgiven, the trance control was through the things it was saying, bringing things to start to quiet down. So in these related people who were part of this spiritual demonstration, who were receiving these pieces of, something was unquiet inside of them. They believed they have not closed a circle. They believed something, there was still something they had to do, but they are missing to do. And um, and with the receiving these gifts, things were put to peace inside of them, right?
And hence the healing could happen thereafter.
Exactly. And this is how in physical mediumship contact with loved ones is happening, right? It's not a phrase, it's not a spoken message, but it is in some way or form a very clear form of physical message. It can be such a gift, let's say, a physical gift. But in other sections of the evening, maybe you, of course, we just spoke about it, there are these waves of touches running over the sitters, and the speech control claims that this is due to loving impulses of afterlife people, let's say, to keep it understandable. So this is how in physical mediumship, let's say, the proof of survival thing is going on. So we are bound into this as well, even though we are always interested of keeping it very varied, very open.
And I just want to say to listeners, if they heard you say the word touches and they start to recoil from this experience,
Yeah.
because they don't want to be in the dark having someone they don't know touching them.
Oh, please,
I,
let me then
yeah,
shortly say something about
sure,
darkness,
of
but
course, yeah,
please.
of course.
No, I didn't want to
Oh,
interrupt you. Please say.
real quick. Yeah, I'm just going to say it real quick. My first experience, it wasn't so much that I was afraid and I didn't believe, but I didn't know what to expect and I was uncomfortable. So I put it out to spirit that I didn't want to be touched, and then that was a UWIPY ceremony, and they honored that. Although I felt the power, I felt them communicating with me on another level. Now, when I sat with you, not only just a week later, you were in Lilydale, and I sat with you. I went in and I went to the next level, and I said to spirit, "It's okay to touch me, just keep it below the knees." And I just said that in my head. I didn't say it to anyone else. It was my own private thought. And I want to assure people that if they're going into this context, what you had said earlier about your controls knowing what is needed in the group and honoring what's in the group, it's not just an entertainment thing where these phenomena are coming up. They're very sensitive to what is needed for those in the group, like that person that needed the healing. So they listened to me, and I got touched on my shin, each shin. And it was amazing to me, even though I believed it, to have that physical proof that they were listening. They were really listening to me and honoring that. While the ladies beside me, they were getting poked and touched all over the place because they were okay with it. So if you're ever in a seance, listeners, I just want to let you know, especially if you're with Kai, most importantly, Kai, I can vouch for this being the truth in terms of spirit really having our back and being there for us in this process. Anyway, yes, so you talk about this now.
Yeah, absolutely. And, there are always two topics people are using to somehow wanting us to start to make doubts about, or and this is usually physical phenomena in themselves, and darkness. So the seance is dark, and 2 hours you won't see your hands in front of your face, and so forth. And probably the medium itself is crawling through the dark and mimicking
Oh,
the
yes, that's what they
spirit.
think. Yes, some people think that.
This is very widespread, and it really has nothing to do with it. In our seances, it is never completely dark. There are always orientation points which are glowing in the dark, or which are put onto objects, that you can locate objects very well, that you can keep up a spatial idea of space around you. The medium is specifically being held by a reliable person in his chair, that he can not quietly stand up or something like that. I mean, we work with trance. Who knows? There is a process. Mediums believe they are incorporating the spirit. And in this process, it is thinkable. They stand up and move to clients, and maybe even touch them or intercommunicate with them in any way or form. This would be then called transfiguration. But when you come to us, you won't come to a transfiguration session. You are coming to a materialization session, and that what happens is independent and autonomous from the medium. And all the processes we are applying is trying to make that very, very transparent. And I believe for the most of the people, it is as transparent as I believe it to be. There are additionally to these glowing points in the dark, regular red light phases. By the way, darkness concerns, the term darkness in my seances concerns here only approximately 35% of the time. Rest of the demonstrated spirit phenomena are happening in red light or even in white light. So this is important to know. So there is not 2 hours of darkness where you cannot actually,
yes,
you know what I mean? So, and to make that complete, of course, there is a connection between spirit phenomena and darkness. And this has, in the first place, to do with our societal subconscious, or the memes we have created, like the witching hour. Worldwide, the witching hour is between 12 o'clock at night, 12 p.m. at night, and 4 o'clock in the morning. The English, for example, say things go bump in the night. Exactly. So nobody is saying things go bump by day.
Yeah, that's true.
And yeah, and I can write you down a list which is approximately a kilometer long, a mile long.
That would be 2.5 5 miles or something.
Yes, exactly. So it's about the wild chase. It's about the incubi and succubi that
Wow.
come at night. It's about the poltergeists that come at night. It's about the UFOs, the UFOs, which abduct you from your bed, of course, at night when you are sleeping. Modern psychotherapy is talking about bedroom visitor phenomena. The Elbish have abducted the little boys and girls and make it the changeling
Oh,
phenomenon.
yes, right.
No? So it all happens in a nightly environment. So and the list, of course, is much, much longer. And we have on the one side, we have this list, and on the other side, we have our human fear of darkness. It both has, it is interplaying, both has a relationship. From the beginning on, we have experienced these experiences more or less very much more often in a darkened environment, nightly. By the way, the original spirit ceremonies, they are all night ceremonies, also because of this. This probably has something to do with perception, but this is another topic we should discuss about normally, but it is rarely discussed. We, of course, discuss it, and we look into the observation phenomena of quantum physics and so forth. What could play a role that a darkened environment is somehow more favorable for these powers, for these forces to come up in our environment. So this is a huge thing to discuss, and it is highly interesting to discuss.
Yes, because you can think about we're all born in the womb, and that is totally dark in there, right? Our mother's womb, it's
Y-
dark. There's creation coming into that space.
but, and why is that so contradictory? Because the motherly womb should tell us peace and warmth, security. We should love the dark. There should be no fear. It is in the motherly womb, it's the last fearless state we come from. But as soon as you are 3 years old, you're coming from Freud's anal phase. In the anal
Oh, right, in
phase,
the psychology of, yes.
you are actually defining yourself from the objective world, and it's coming with the poo, you're
Yep.
giving off the control, the poo. This is how you start to objectify your outside world. And as soon as little boys and girls coming into this phase, they are starting to ask their parents for a little light to let on when they go to sleep at night, to let the door a little bit open. And the aware parents who hold in and say, why is my child suddenly afraid of darkness? I am going and ask him or her. And they ask, what is it? Why are you suddenly afraid of the dark? Then these little children will answer you, yeah, there is a monster in my
Mm.
closet. Or there is an apparition under my bed. No, apparition is too mature. So
Yeah, it's a big
they
word.
yes, they verbalize very infantile ideas of uh, supernatural ongoings. The monster in the closet is an infantile idea of encountering a supernatural something.
Yeah. Their
Um,
interpretation of what's probably in some form present for them, right? And also, what I would like to point out real quick, just but go back to what you were saying, please. The idea that you brought in about the poo, right? The
yeah.
defecation and that separation and recognition of that. Um, it's like you can't, the idea of control, right? So we're trying to control our feces and our urinary. It's like that control. So now all of a sudden, when we're out of control, that's where I think the fear comes in.
Yes, very much so. You have very much a good point here. And all in the end, it all together interplays towards the fact that the mass of experiment, when we look into the history of supernatural phenomena, the history of supernatural phenomena is the history of their manifestation around us human beings. And these manifestations have happened mainly, let's say mainly, there were exceptions, of course, but mainly they have happened by night. And this is the connection with the darkened seance room. Experimenters are asking, what is a favorable environment for these beings? And they look into the chronics and into the history of encountering supernatural encounters and so forth and experiences, and they find out it happens all at night.
Yeah.
And they offer then at least as well, or initiating for an initiating process, maybe they offer darkness. That's the connection of the seance room with darkness.
Mm-hmm.
We human beings have sat in these ceremonial night ceremonies from the beginning on. Actually, we feel very integrated in this environment, and we are not afraid. People who firstly thought, oh, I might be afraid when I'm sitting in the dark. They sit down, and the lights go off, and they recognize suddenly another world
Yes.
revealing in front of their whole awareness, right?
And they're not able to use their senses in the same way that they're accustomed to. So again, that question of uncertainty comes in, right?
Exactly,
Can't see, I can't
exactly.
hear, I can't, I can feel, but I can't control or manage what's in front of me or anticipate what's coming next, which can be very unnerving.
Not only unnerving, I even believe it is even a form of making things available.
Mm.
So that there is this term elusivity. Supernatural phenomena, they display an elusivity, and they are hard to catch. You have your camera the whole day focused onto the point where the phenomenon is happening,
Mhm.
and 1 second you check it, and
Exactly.
exactly in this second, and that's this moment of uncertainty, and these phenomena won't be able to give this away, because if they would be approachable like physics or chemistry or sociology or psychology is, then there wouldn't be any more this difference.
Mm.
Supernatural phenomena are therefore supernatural and even not natural. Of course, everything is natural what is existing, but what is the difference between a biological phenomenon and a supernatural phenomenon? It is that the supernatural phenomenon is like an ongoing, eternal trigger, which is always urging us to ask one more question, to find one more wider answer than the answer you have found before. So it is always questioning your spatial environment and always urges you to widen the world you are living in.
Right.
And this is a super beautiful and super holistical and eclectic approach here we should actually appreciate. And I hope it is.
Well, I think the one thing that you're bringing through here is that curiosity, fascination, things like trust of spirit, to just surrender and let go and say, fill this void of wonder, fill this void of curiosity. What else do you got? Is another way to
Yeah,
say it, right?
exactly. So
Yeah.
it's a treasure chest. It is a real treasure
Yeah.
chest to first excavate and then explore. And we are not only traveling to get people into our seances. From the beginning on, we were explaining that actually you can very easily, there is an easy approach to this, and it does not cost much. You only need 4 friends, which are mature and which are spiritual sovereign, let's say. And when you call the spirits in that way, expecting them to answer you in this objective way and form, then sooner or later, and usually it is sooner, not later. There are these legions out there that you have to sit for years. That is nonsense. Most of the groups which start, and I have encountered dozens, hundreds, I have encountered a lot of them, and usually they do not wait longer for the spirit world to answer them than maybe longest 6 months or so. But I even have heard very a few ones longer, but the vast majority not longer than between 2 weeks and 3 months, maybe. And the content is there, and then follows the guidelines of physical mediumship, and the spiritual world will objectively manifest in front of you in a quality you never had before. And the days of doubting yourself and doubting the spirit world we all have come across are over.
I love that. Yeah. So
That's the beauty of it.
Oh, it sure is. Sure is. Your controls, those that work with you now, can you tell us a little bit about them and just give us a sense of how that works for you?
Yeah, there is a team which is bound very close to the build of the seance room and what is going on through the time frame of the seance, and they all have their responsibility. The one is responsible for basic physical phenomena. The next is responsible to get in contact with higher spiritual intelligences and higher spiritual messages. The next is responsible for the mood of the sitters, that nobody is frightened or something like that. The next is responsible for directing healing energies in the seance towards maybe sitters that need it. So, and this is only the inner circle of the spirit team, actually. One, of course, he is the most important in this regards. It's the one who is moderating the evening and who is balancing the verbal content which is spoken between sitters and the spirits. So, and this is the inner layer, and then there is the outer layer, angelic beings and extraterrestrials and ascended masters from many different religious systems. They all pop into the communication scheme, and they, from evening to evening, they can play different roles in regards to their presence.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes the one is more present, sometimes the one is not at all present.
That makes sense because they're dealing with the dynamics of the group as well, right?
Exactly.
Feeling that are required.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. Are they speaking? At the very beginning, we were mentioning what we need in terms of going forward, that recognition of the multiverse, right? That those different layers that are happening simultaneously and how that we're all a part of it. But what are your guides talking about in terms lately, in terms of the world or spiritual development, spirituality? Is there anything that would be more of a global concept that they're presenting and spending time with?
Very, very much so. And I am very happy that they are doing it.
Yeah.
Because we believe that the world still is in crisis. Specifically, we here in Europe recognize that. to a good deal. And what we recognize that that one of the symptoms of this crisis is the muting, the muteness of the people. There are legions of people who, in the last years, have put themselves in for learning from the teachings of history. And there is a famous term which is very much popular: Frieden schaffen ohne Waffen, create peace without weapons.
Oh,
And this was a very main meme, a very main term. And here has changed. So many things have changed here. And I mean, we are just coming from the teachings of the Second World War, where we Germans are responsible for 25 million dead Russians. And that actually urges us to be very, very sensitive with everything which is going on here. And in regards to this and regards to pacifism, things run very false. And, our guides claim, and I have to follow them here, spirituality is pacifistic. Spirituality is not condoning to give anybody a weapon into the hand and to say it's righteous to kill because the circumstances are giving you this right. We believe this is profoundly false, profoundly false. And in the spiritual scene, nobody is reflecting, nobody is saying a word. And we are actually, we have tried to, firstly, our guides speak. And for years, they have warned of that crisis, but we have not rightly understood them. I cannot explain it myself, but it was about the paradigm change 4 years ago when we all believed we are so close to paradigm change and we might be then ascending into a new dimensionality where the burden of flesh and so forth, but it all broke together, as we know. The paradigm shift went into the other went into
Yeah,
the
well,
other
so many
direction.
people, I remember hearing them during that COVID period just talking about how they can't wait for everything to get back to normal. And I kept thinking, no, this is our opportunity to think about things differently.
Absolutely, and of course, I'm talking about the Ukraine war.
Oh, yes, and that too. Yes.
The 3 years before, which you are mentioning, they were, of course, the start of the crisis. So we are already in a further stage of the crisis. The first stage was Corona and how we handled it. We Germans,
Yeah.
we have stinged thousands of people to death. And doctors in Germany have, without asking, put handicapped people to death. And until today, the historic houses in which that has taken place are houses with a very, very bad energy, in which the whole the body of physicians, there is a society where all physicians are, and already at the Second World War, when they were being told, kill life unworthy life, they did it. And here we have now this crisis, and without having the wit to ask questions, they were putting the vaccine stings into the arms of the people. And in the 70s, 80s, or 90s of the last century, if we had a vaccination, which only had 5 people who were somehow injured by it, this vaccination would have immediately stopped worldwide. Only 5 of patients that might have experienced a negative reaction. And unquestionably, we have 10,000s of people who reacted, unfortunately, with a heart condition of some sorts. And we have sportlers that died on scene. And you are not allowed to talk about it. If you are talking about it, you are an extremist. And
Yeah, you're extreme in your thinking, and depending on which side of the fence you're on in the first place, the other side will, push you further
absolutely,
away.
it is not anymore possible to simply exchange arguments. You are and this is a spiritual crisis. This is a spiritual catastrophe that we actually made a step back in the age of enlightenment. This is anti-enlightenment, which is going on at the moment.
Yeah, and so I like what you're saying, because it's not so much about the actual manifestation of whether you take the vaccine or not. It's about what is not being permitted in terms of the freedom of understanding, not speech, but understanding, right? That we're in a position where we're not even allowing ourselves to see all sides of the equation.
Absolutely. And look at the vaccinated. They all wanted to do good, and they all were believing it is their responsibility to do that. And today we know they knew from the start on it would not actually help in this course of infestation. I mean, one thing is clear, there a lot of money was being made all around the globe, and that was in the beginning, and all the governments were behaving the same. All around the world, they were using the same arguments as if somebody had told them, do it that way, or do it that way. And everybody who's awake and everybody who's intellectual has recognized that. But there are 70% of the society who simply from their personality, or what the last 30 years or last 50 years since the Second World War made of them. So we have 70% who are very much oriented to a public view, and they like to believe the government. And until a few years, it was okay to believe the government. But if you learn more and more that the government has the capacity to lie to you, and if it is around these ethical and moral themes, then we come into stages when spirituality even become political, because there are happening things which are not morally or ethically correct anymore, and people are misleaded.
And feeling like if we look at this, we're seeing a pattern, right? And it's the same thing they say about all history. If you don't look at your past, you're going to repeat the past in the future, right?
Yes,
So you had mentioned earlier, and I love that you brought that up earlier, the Fox sisters, and how that wasn't, we call that the start of spiritualism, but it wasn't necessarily the first time that spirit was knocking on doors and walls and floors.
absolutely not.
Right?
Absolutely
There
not.
was all this mediumship that was going on ahead of time, but it was the propaganda. It was the voice of the media that was pulling this around. And if you look at the Second World War, it was the voice of the media that allowed it
Absolutely.
to
The
move.
power
And
of
so
the media.
now, same question. So then it makes it really hard for us as individuals to find, well, what is truth? What do we trust? So here we are talking about physical mediumship and how we want to trust spirit. We want to get into this place where even in
Absolutely.
mediumship,
But we were talking,
that's the spiritual
also.
journey, right?
Absolutely. But we were talking also, you had asked me, had the spirits in the last years a specific
Yes,
topic?
what are they talking about? This is what they're talking about.
Exactly. But what we learn in regards to physical mediumship is here that physical mediumship is never without message.
Right.
Because if we look at these phenomena and we look at the photos and we look at the materialized spirits, you could have the idea that this is the physical seance. but it is not. It is only a short part. The manifestations are a vehicle to teach us some things. And
Hmm.
this is very important that we learn that the physical seance, it's a spiritual ceremony, it's a spiritual ritual, and that's why there are spiritual contents, spirits that have to say something about this or about that, but there are spirits who have to say something to us, and the physical phenomena are a proof of their actual presence. Dear Kathleen, unfortunately, I had the time 3 to 4 o'clock, and I
It's fine.
unfortunately
Yeah.
have 4:30. Please forgive me. I would
No
have
worries.
loved
We
to,
could talk forever, obviously. I'm enjoying this tremendously.
yeah, maybe if you like, because we of course just have scratched at everything. If you like to deepen this, I would be always ready to deepen this with you. But for now, I
We
need
gotta
to
go.
say
I got it.
I'm so sorry. I don't want to
No,
be
don't be.
rude. It's not my art usually, so
You're
please
not
forgive
being
me.
rude. It's about time anyway. So I want to thank you so much for being with us. There's so much richness in what you have to offer us as a person that's willing to commit to spirit and do it in the way that feels right for you and is within your gifts and abilities. And I encourage people that are listening, if you have followed us all the way to the end, to explore this further, explore what Kai is doing further. I'm going to leave a whole bunch of listed links on the post there so we can see where we can find out more information. There's wonderful stuff. I also, before you go, want to mention Julia's role in your
Oh,
team.
yes, of course.
Is,
How could we
you're
not
on this
use her
side, that
name?
side, a huge group. It takes a village. And I just wanted to give honor and credence to Julia's role too. And again, that's something we can talk more about next time. So I very much appreciate this. Listeners, enjoy the show, watch it again and again, get more out of it. And we will see another medium next week. Thank you, Kai. Please be
Thank
well.
you, thank
Stay
you,
well.
thank you, thank you, thank you. Bye bye, my dear
Bye
Kathleen.
bye.
Bye bye.